Welcome into yet another episode of the Online Church Blueprint. I'm Andy, one of your hosts, and I'll be joined by Mark in just a few short minutes. But you'll notice that I've got sort of this eggplant fuchsia. What would you call this color, Austin? Lilac? What'd you say? Purple. Purple's so boring, though. I don't know. Leave in the comments what color you think this is. You can do a color match on your computer and you can see what the actual hex code is. I am actually not in my home studio today. We had a number of things going on, and so welcome to Studio B here at Bay Hope Church in Tampa, lovely Tampa, Florida, where it's been raining off and on for the last 3 days, and it feels like hurricanes have been coming through, although they haven't. But yeah, we had, like I said, we had a number of things going on. Mark's going to be joining me shortly. He has a fun story about where he's actually recording from today, and I'll let him get to that. But today we wanted to kind of get to the basics and the root of digital community. It's kind of something that's been rattling around in the back of both of our brains, and it's something we've been trying to do at our respective churches. So myself with him at Lux, and then here at Bay Hope Church, along with Austin, who you just heard there, hopefully on the microphone, and then really at the Church Digital and with the DCN Digital Church Network, and even with Altar Live, we've been trying to create community, because really community fosters growth, community fosters love, community fosters engagement, and in the church space, community really fosters discipleship. And so that's really what we're key on. We're trying to be kingdom minded about this. So this episode is going to be all about that, kind of the building blocks of digital community, giving you some kind of best practices, some tools. There's a number of interesting things that Mark has to say about exclusivity and inclusivity and how all of that works in digital community, and how to feel safe and how to moderate and do all of those other things. And it's really kind of a cool conversation. We got done with his portion, and then he had to go run pick his daughter up. And as I was hitting stop, I just said, Mark, that was honestly that one little stretch there. It was all great, but there was one little stretch there where he and I had a really cool conversation that was kind of off of our talking points that we had in pre-production. And it was very cool, and some of the things that were coming out of his brain were fascinating, and I can't wait for you to hear them. In this episode of the Online Church Blueprint, again, we are brought to you by our good friends and kind of really our sponsors over at DCN Digital Church Network, the Church Digital, and the Church.digital, along with Jeff Reed and everybody over there. Check that out. There we've got cohorts and courses and engagement training and tools and resources, and oh, by the way, consultation if you want myself or Mark to jump in and really kind of help you along your journey wherever you at, either innovating and starting your digital church or hybrid or phygital church, all the way into, hey, we just need to make sure that we can get our live streams up and running. We're here to help you. Head on over there. mychurch.digital, thechurch.digital, Digital Church Network, and of course our good friends over at Altar Live. Altar Live is the number one source for engagement, the number one platform out there for churches that are looking for a one-stop shop for all things live streaming, for all things meeting, for all things lobby, for all things fun and engagement, and all of those things kind of put together. You can get rid of all your Zoom subscriptions. You can get rid of Facebook Live. You can get rid of all those other things with one Altar Live subscription. There's a link below in the comments, or if you are listening to this via podcast, there is a link in the show notes that will get you a free 14-day trial to Altar Live. It's the best. All right, got all that out of the way. Let's get ready for this episode and this kind of conversation about creating community here on the Online Church Blueprint. Welcome back to a very purple Easter egg edition of the Online Church Blueprint. And you can see Mark Lutz, also co-host of the Online Church Blueprint. We are in different studios than we normally are. Where are you located?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're watching on YouTube, I guess you know this. If you're listening on podcast, this is probably very confusing to you, but you can probably hear a difference in the quality of my microphone, because yes. I'm running this through a Surface Pro with a very, instead of running through a Behringer X32, I'm running through a Wave XLR interface. Instead of sitting on a really good mic, I am sitting on its younger USB cousin. And so, so I am locked out of my studio as of this morning, and won't be getting in until my wife gets home from work. So we rigged up a old DSLR that my wife had into a laptop with a $200 interface and a $200 mic. So here we are with worse equipment in a studio in my basement instead of above my garage. So
it's all about the knowledge that you share with us. I've been calling Mark the esteemed Mark Lutz over the last couple of days, and I get a kick out of that.
And he consistently says that isn't. I don't know about that. Yeah. So just for the record, he humbly does not accept the esteemed status. So
I was going to say, I think a little part of his soul every time I say it dies, which I think is hysterical to me. I, on the other hand, normally my home studio it's a decent setup. I've got, all the cameras and the microphones and all the lights, and I keep reorganizing it. And I think I've got it to where I actually like it now. I preached there from Lux last night, and I went back, or at Lux, and I went back and looked at the shot, and I was like, that looks tasty.
It does. It looks very good.
I'm pretty good with how that feels, but I am actually in like $100,000 studio here at Bay Hope Church. We had a number of things happening today, and we sandwiched this recording in between like 3 other things that are happening here in the studio today. So thanks so much for joining us. And before we get going, Mark, the question of the day, small talk. I want to get all this junk out of the way. Easter. What's your guys' modus operandi in Easter with the girls, with your wife? Do you guys do presents? Do you do the bunny? Do you do chocolate and eggs? Like what do you guys do?
Yeah, we do chocolate eggs and rabbits. My wife and I were actually having this conversation last night about like, what is the best candy-oriented holiday? And when she said Easter is better than Christmas, and to my response to that was Christmas is not a candy holiday. Halloween and Easter are candy holidays. And we both think that Easter is the best candy holiday because there's so many unique candies to it. But yes, the girls come downstairs, candy trail, jelly bean trail to the Easter baskets, which I didn't realize, like my wife's family growing up, there was a lot more gifts involved in the Easter basket than I think what I grew up. I don't know if I remember correctly, but I just remember a lot of fake grass, chocolate bunnies, Reese's cups, and jelly beans. And like my daughter got a Miles Morales pajama set. And so it's like a Miles Morales onesie because they watch the Spider-Man cartoon, like the new Spidey and his friends or whatever. And so my oldest daughter has a Ghost Spider onesie, and now my youngest daughter has a spin onesie, and she's freaking adorable in it. But they got like dresses and candy and bubbles and chalk and markers and like, I mean, nothing expensive, but it was all stuff that was like, I didn't get this stuff when I was a kid. But no, we did that. And then I'm a 1%er, Andy. I'm a 1%er. And by that, I mean, my parents are together, my wife's parents are together, and our parents like one another and do holidays together. And this literally doesn't happen in almost anybody else's life. No. A true, genuine 1%er. And so we go to my parents' house on Easter, and my in-laws and my brother and my sister-in-law and my brother-in-law and his fiance and all of the kids all in the same house, all eat a meal together, all ride quads together. We shoot guns. We enjoy each other's company. Now, my 5-year-old and 3-year-old don't shoot guns, but me and my father-in-law and my brother and brother-in-law and my dad do. And it's just great. And here in Western PA, it was like 75 degrees and sunny all Easter day. So, I mean, it could not have been better. It was gorgeous, and the cheesy potatoes and peanut butter pie were delicious.
Yeah.
How about you, Andy? What about you guys, your family? What do you guys do for Easter?
Our kids are grown, so we used to do just chocolate and stuff, chocolate in baskets. We never did the jelly bean trail. That was never kind of our thing. It was just always, here's your Easter basket. We got to go to church because I'm pastor, and so I was like, we got to do this quick. We would do Easter egg hunts, but it would be at other people's houses, and they'd find money or candy or anything, or inside the little eggs. When I was growing up, though, my parents would do like the powdered, like they would take baby powder and make like rabbit trails all over the house, which I thought was real cute. And then we'd have Easter egg hunts. Like we would actually do the eggs back before eggs were used as currency and were thousands of dollars to buy a dozen of them. We dye them.
Eggs.
Oh, did you do dyed or did you do the plastic ones?
No, we dyed them. We dyed them like 2 days before Easter with my parents. So we did. I mean, we had to remortgage our house, but we did do it.
Hey, congrats, man. The college tuition that it costs to dye those eggs, good on you, man. And that smell brings back everything. We used to do presents, though. We would do the whole Easter egg hunt thing, and then my parents would always say, okay, your present is around here. The Easter bunny hid it. Go find it. We'd have to find it. Sometimes it'd be in the oven or downstairs in the basement or whatever. Sure. I remember one year I got a bike. and then the other year I got like
Wow.
a Ghostbusters. This is back when Ghostbusters 2 came out. Oh no, when the cartoon was coming out. I got a proton pack with a gun.
Oh, dope.
I had like a Nerf thing and then a trap, and it was my brother and I were just Ghostbusters for that entire summer. It was pretty awesome. So, yeah, the only reason I ask, A, because it looks like a princess's bedroom behind us, and looks like Easter egg walls behind me, and B, we're just coming off the Easter holiday, and one of the coolest things that always happens in church world, digital or physical church world, is that lots of people show back up to church. It's kind of the third most attended holiday behind Christmas and Mother's Day in churches,
Sure.
in hybrid churches or in physical churches. Digital is all over the place. But we now have this opportunity to, what do we do with these people? We have this opportunity to connect them in the community, but how? How do we do that in a physical context, in a hybrid context, and most importantly, in a digital online context? And so Mark and I kind of wanted to have a conversation and bring about a few tips as to, how we could create digital community, how we could foster digital community, and most importantly, how we could grow digital community. So Mark, I guess let's start from the very beginning, you being digital pastor. I'm not going to say esteemed because I don't want to watch your soul die on camera, but
You said it anyway, so that's perfect. Yeah.
You're welcome. What is digital community? Like, let's define what it actually is going forward. So, in your eyes, what does digital community look like?
I think that I could literally remove the word digital out from in front of it, and I think we would be looking at the same definition in many ways, because community is community, right? This is people doing life, living life together, supporting one another, participating in one another's life, sharpening one another, sometimes discouraging one another, disappointing one another, forgiving one another, all of those things that we, all the stuff that we see in any sort of physical church, or, your local Elks Club, or I don't know, I think the Elks Club's racist now or something, but, whatever it is, right? Like there's, people look and search for community. They look for it at the bar, they look for it at, the VFW, or, and then at their church, right? If you're in a town like mine, there's really only two places to find community. It's church and the bar. And, it used to be this coffee shop that we had in town, but now the owner sucks. So less community happens there than it used to. And, but it's this finding of communal spaces where people come together and gather. And then I would say it extends to, like hospitality and opening up your home and inviting people in and that sort of stuff. And so then the question becomes like, what does that look like in digital space, and how does that work? And it's, you put digital in front of community really because you're just signifying the fact that instead of using the tools that you would typically use to creating community is a really funny term, because it's as though you can be intentional about it. It's as though I think that you can intentionally create situations where community can happen, but you can't fabricate it and you can't actually create it, right? All that you can do is create environments in which community has the ability to happen. And so in the same, instead of using and creating those spaces using physical tools, you open up your church building, you have your small group leaders open up their homes to people, you have a church potluck, you do, drop 1,000 eggs from a helicopter or whatever for a church event, and invite people into community there. Right, we're just using digital tools to create spaces where community can happen, and so people do naturally create community, or they just choose not to. You can't force people into a community. People actually have to participate in order to find community, but you're just really creating spaces for community to happen, for life on life to happen, and for people to connect with one another. And, the concept of digital community is just saying, hey, we're using digital tools to create those spaces where community has the opportunity to actually happen at. And so for me, really, what is digital community? Community is community, but the word digital out in front of it just means that we're creating spaces where community can happen using digital tools instead of using, physical tools.
What and so obviously you said the right thing, or said the great thing there, where you remove that prefix digital and community becomes community, and you can find it at your racist Elks Lodge, you can find it at the bar, you can find it at the hockey rink, you can find it all over the place, and that's great. But in a church context, I think community almost has that word like fellowship, kind of has that word that's been built up over time to mean
It's got a
something.
buzzy. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, well, hey, we're going to be intentional about our community. And like, we're having those conversations right now at Bay Hope. I know we're always having those conversations at Lux where you need intentionality around it, and you need to make sure that you have this group of people, this massive people that showed up for Easter, let's say. Okay, how do we be intentional about actually putting them, giving them spaces to self-select into, or do you force them into community? And so I guess the question I want to ask now is, what are the building blocks? What are the starting blocks that you can either let people self-select or force people into in a digital capacity?
Yeah, I mean, can you force people into
you
community?
Can, but you can, and I've seen, and the reason I'm saying that is that I've seen churches do it, and sometimes it works. Sometimes it works great, and the way you force them into is, hey, if you want to be a member of this church, you have to come to these 3 classes, and you have to join this small group.
Sure, I mean, you can put a carrot at the end of the stick, right?
Correct. Yeah, and then the carrot is then at that point you can go and serve and do the whole thing, and it's a very short-term thing that you're forcing people into. It has varied results. We don't do that here at Bay Hope. We did that at a church that I used to work for, and that church ended up not thriving in the way that I think they could have until they eliminated that. Hey, you need to go through 101, 201, 301, 401, and then join a small group for 8 weeks before you can do anything else at this church. Their reasons and their intentions behind it were, listen, we need to make sure that people understand our theology, and they understand what, our orthopraxy, and they understand exactly what we're doing. They understand how we do group. They need to feel the lifeblood of this church, and that's fine. But in the context that we're in Southern New Jersey at that point, like, people are busy. People got kids. Like, they're going to self-select out, and they're going to find community at the volleyball court, or they're going to find community at marching band competitions, and not the church.
And arguably, maybe they should, right? Like, I think arguably maybe they should. I think one of the problems with the church in general right now is that we monopolize people's time to the point that they can't have friendships with people who aren't Christians, right? And so we're like, no, your community needs to happen in small groups because we can track it and it proves that we're doing the right thing. No, your community needs to be found inside the church and inside your team. And then you have somebody who, like, they're your star player, right? But your star player doesn't have a single person in their life who doesn't know Jesus, because none of their communities exist outside of your church. And eventually what happens, and this is like the plateauing of every church plant, right? Or a lot of church plants, right? Unless they refresh and, regain momentum, is that eventually you start with a bunch of people who don't know Jesus, or people who have friends who don't know Jesus, and eventually all their friends show up, and then the idea of reaching new people just sort of fades over time, and everybody doesn't have any friends who don't know Jesus anymore because everyone's in the club. And I think that does, and so I think the end goal, right, isn't necessarily that everybody needs to find community inside your church. The end goal is that everybody has community. And for some people, the best thing that they can have is an accountability partner and a community of people that they're connected with who don't know Jesus. And I think you see that a lot in some of like the micro church model. If you look at like KC Underground or Tampa Underground, I mean, they're really big on that, right? They don't want all of your friends to just be people who know Jesus. They want the majority of your friends to be people who actually don't, because you're living on mission inside of the community that you're in. I think there's a lot of conversation. My point is, there's a lot of conversation that can go into like, where should the people in your church be finding community? Is it important for them to be finding community inside your church? Is that something that you have to provide? Can you force people into it? You force people into a small group. That doesn't mean they're actually finding community. It just means that they're spending an hour of their week someplace they don't want to be. And I'm not saying that no one wants to be in your small group. Some people may want to be in your small groups. I'm just saying somebody who doesn't want to find community inside your church and goes to small group just so that they can become a member of your church is not actually finding community inside your church. They're just being forced to spend an hour at somebody's house they don't want to be at. And they'll look for opportunities to not be there. And so for me, I don't think it's about like forcing people into community. It's what tools am I using to create spaces where community can happen? And that's not as big of a challenge in a physical church, because it just makes sense, right? You open your building on Sunday morning, you open your building throughout the week, and there are like physical spaces that people can come and gather. In digital space, that's a little bit more challenging, because the spaces where people connect are not as evident, right? They're not as intuitive. You have to be, and a lot of times the tools don't exist to even allow that to happen, right? One of the reasons that I love Discord so much is because it can happen there. It can happen in limited capacities in a live stream chat as well, I think. But it is very rare for it to happen over a platform like Instagram, for example, where it's not super easy to actually engage with one another in any sort of capacity that's helpful or real.
So you mentioned Discord. We talk a lot about kind of ways of opening spaces for community. So in a digital context, then, what are the building blocks of those spaces? You know, in a hybrid church or even in a physical church, you know, we've talked about small groups. You do those things, but you can open a classroom and say, hey, everybody, this is where the quilting happens, you know, or this is where those kind of older examples, but that's, or, you know, hey, this is where youth group happens, you know, this is where all those things. How do you do that in a digital context?
Yeah, I think some of this, it has to do with containment, and it's not always easy to liken physical spaces to digital spaces in a way that's like super easy to wrap your mind around, especially if you're unfamiliar with digital space. So let me give you this example for just as an idea. The safety that you feel walking through a parking lot at night is very different than the feeling that you have when you walk inside your home. And a good portion of that is because of the walls, right? You feel contained. The wider the space is, the more we naturally feel cautious and maybe anxious, or we feel unsafe. And so when you walk into a physical building, those walls that kind of go up around you create a sense of safety and protection, and oftentimes open up an ability for you to engage. And then it also has to do with the familiarity of the space, right? And so if I walk into a brand new space, let's say I walk into the doctor's office, never been to this doctor's office before, I have all sorts of hesitation, maybe about vulnerability here, right? I don't really want to be. But if I walk into your home, and I've been in your home a dozen times, and we have sort of like, you know, refrigerator level permission in each other's life. I do this with my friends, Jake and Kristen. I can walk into Jake's house and grab a drink out of the fridge and not feel any weirdness about that, because we have that level of comfort with one another, and we've been in their house many times. And so when it comes to digital platforms that allow you to foster community, I think that the first thing you look at are, what are the tools that are in my hands that allow me to put up walls and basically carve out a digital space out of the proverbial endless digital sea. Because the internet feels a lot like an endless dark parking lot in many ways for people, right? It's not particularly homey. There's nothing comfortable about it. You don't feel particularly safe in it. And one of the things that made Facebook so incredibly powerful, at least at the start, is it really allowed you to carve out your own personal rooms. And then it allowed you to connect your room to anybody else's room that you wanted to, right? And there was some level of exclusivity to it that sort of drew people in. Facebook loses a lot of that now, and I think gets a bad rap for that, because what have they allowed into your room? They've allowed advertisements into your room. They've allowed reels into your room. They've allowed information that you didn't even want to see into your room. And now it doesn't really feel like your house anymore, right? It feels like the doors are unlocked and the windows are open and someone blew down the front wall. And now anybody has permission to walk in. You might have 3 of the 4 walls that once made up the house that you were in, but without that 4th wall, it feels substantially less safe. And so it's a lot harder for you to build community. Then comes in things like Facebook groups, for example, or Facebook pages that begin to feel a little bit more safe, right? Because it's this curated place that has a select group of people, and people have to maybe, apply to be able to get access to it. And so there's some level of exclusivity. You feel like you put up walls, and there's some sort of boundaries in place. You don't feel like you're wandering around in the parking lot, the digital parking lot of Walmart, whatever. And so I think that when you're looking, you're saying, okay, what tools are actually at my disposal to put up walls, to put on a roof, and to put the door where I want the door, and only let the people through the door that I want to let through the door. Right? And this is going to become progressively more important in the world of artificial intelligence, where the internet is going to become consumed by more robots than it is real people. Right. And so who you can and cannot let through the door will become progressively more important as AI learns to understand the nature of humans and can imitate them. And so I think why I love Discord and why I have searched for another digital platform that can do this for the church is because it gives you all of the tools at your disposal to put the walls wherever in the heck you want them. And you can be wide open with it and build a pavilion that anybody can come in. You can build a mansion. You can build a little nice, neat home that only a handful of people have the key to, and so you know who's going to be there. And I think that is a really healthy thing in terms of tools to build digital spaces. And there's just not many platforms that actually, as the creator of the space that you're creating, so that people can come in and find community. There's not a lot of people that. Not a lot of places or digital tools that give you the power to do that well. I realize that all could be a little bit heady, what I just talked about there, but I think it's important, and I think it helps bridge some of the gaps between physical mindsets and digital mindsets.
Yeah, there's two follow-up things to that. Number one, the exclusivity thing. If you are listening to this and you're hearing, you immediately kind of cringe at that word exclusivity, and you relate that to the church of the last 2,000 years that has kind of tried to shut the doors on a lot of people. That's not what Mark is talking about. What Mark is talking about is allowing access as needed, allowing safety or ensuring safety, ensuring standard, ensuring protocol. The AI thing is an interesting topic, and I think we should probably follow up on that at some point in this show, because I think there's a decent amount that AI can do for us in terms of community building, but also there's a heck of a lot more that AI can do in destroying community. The second thing I want to bring up, and we are obviously sponsored by Altar Live. We are also sponsored by the Church Digital and kind of the Church Digital Podcast Network. And so that's kind of two different things right there. TCD and DCN are exclusively trying to create community amongst church planters, amongst church innovators and church leaders and things like that. And Altar Live is trying to bring about spaces that can happen, meeting spaces and room spaces and lobby spaces where all of those things can happen, where, like Mark said, you can control access. You can shut a door, open a door. You can create the pavilion. You can create the amphitheater if you want with a live stream. You can do all of those things and allow both of those, so the communities that are being created by DCN and TCD and the platform of Altar Live to kind of interoperate. If you are a physical church, a hybrid church, or a solely digital church, those are real kind of awesome things. Real quick, let's talk about moderation then, because that does become an incredibly important piece of digital community. It does in physical community, but one of the most chilling things that has happened, especially at our church here at Bay Hope, is that we have a day school here with hundreds of pre-K and kindergarten kids. And as of this week, we now have an armed security guard walking around. And we have a security team here. Now, he's a nice guy. The team's going to do well. I don't reckon anything is ever going to happen here. Knock on wood. Please, Jesus, don't let that happen. But that's a way of controlling access. That's a way of actual security. It is in essence moderation. Moderation in a physical church looks a lot different than moderation in a digital church. What does moderation look like for you when you are building community?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting because of the anonymous nature of the internet, which is probably one of its best and worst qualities. People can seek to do harm in ways that they couldn't necessarily seek to do harm in a physical church, right? Everyone's voice is a lot closer to one another in digital spaces. And so just because I'm the one on the microphone doesn't mean that somebody else can't say something that the entire church can see during a service. And so in your physical church, it's probably not going to happen, right? Like Joe isn't going to show up to your church, and while your pastor's preaching, he's going to jump up and shout, "False liar," and then tear into your pastor or post a bunch of blasphemous stuff or like
last night when I was preaching and somebody was just like, "Oh, so I have to do this then? Oh, so I got to give up TV and internet and movies." Sure. It's like, no.
Yeah, exactly. Like taking your ideas out of context and then being able to do that in a public forum, or no one's going to stand up in the front of your church and with a 32-inch TV with pornography on it and show it to your whole church. Whereas in our scenario, they can potentially do that inside of our Discord server, post links and whatever. And so moderation really is about preventing harm from people who aren't there for the right reasons, just the same as your security guard is, right? The church I used to work for, before our 15th year anniversary, we had a guy who just was not all there come over the hill to where all of our bounce houses were with his pickup truck with a fully automatic weapon in the back of it, with every intention of shooting children. And, you know, thankfully, we had 4 armed security volunteers who were there, who went through all the clearances and background checks to be able to cuff the dude, hit him as he was coming out of his truck, cuffed him and got him in a cop car and got him out of there before most of our church even knew what was going on. And so that in digital space just looks way different because the type of harm that people can seek to do is less intense, but more available. And so, so in that case, it was like the extreme worst case scenario for us, and we had the moderation in place to take care of it. At Lux, or in the digital space, the moderation has to be able to deal with a lot of different things, and sometimes it can even be automated to be able to handle it, right? And so a lot of our server is moderated by a bot that prevents people from posting inappropriate stuff, and then we have moderators to sort of prevent that, because it's just easier from the anonymous point of view with how close our voices are together for people to seek to do harm in different ways.
Agreed. My only other thing in kind of a hybrid thing, in a hybrid role, especially if you are the type of church that is live streaming on a Sunday, my advice would be just to watch your chat very, very deeply. In creating digital community at Lux, obviously there is the bot there. There's a whole lot of things that are kind of doing things. Sometimes some stuff slips through the goalie, especially in kind of a live stream, in a Twitch service. And so you just making sure that you have a trained group of volunteers who A, care about your church, B, care about you as a pastor, leader, whomever, and C, have the right kind of tools at their disposal, be it mod tools, be it ban, be it timeout, be it whatever, and that they know how to use those things, that they're not going to just wield the ban hammer however they want, which is funny to think of, but we've both been part of communities where just flame wars and ban wars have gone on, and it's out of hand.
Yeah, I think giving them the proper tools and giving them some training. Our teams have an idea. If you're a moderator, this is what we moderate and what we don't. And it was not easy to figure out at first because we did have people who came in with genuine questions that seemed hostile. And your goal isn't to ban people that seem hostile. But for example, 2 weeks ago, my wife and I were on camera during a live service, and somebody new came in to chat and said something about a sex tape between the two of us. Something that's not an uncommon thing to happen, something like that inside of digital space. And one of our moderators quickly timed him out for like a minute and a half, and we had a chance to address it without him posting back. Really simple way to be able to say, hey, you're not able to talk for the next minute and a half. Don't be an idiot. We're glad that you're here. And I think like giving your moderators tools to be able to do stuff like that, and also the training to know how to handle a situation, and don't just ban people on first offense, or don't just, kick people from your service or whatever, I think is a very helpful thing. And your team needs trained on how to do that sort of stuff.
Agreed. We have a couple minutes left. And in those couple of minutes, I want to pick your brain a little bit. How do you grow digital community? Anybody listening to this is going, yeah, cool. We've got tools. I can Google search all of these things. But what do I actually do to grow my 10 or 15 people that are diehards? How do I get that number larger? Not because I want to glorify myself, but because I want to glorify the kingdom.
So I think after you have the tools, like Ultra Live or like a Discord server or like Facebook groups, whatever, it starts with the leader's willingness to live a part of their life there, right? Or even the majority of your life there. If you're like, well, no, I just have my life, and then I create this space where people can come hang out. If you won't hang out there, they're not going to hang out there. And so I think it starts with the leader. Are you actually actively living your life there? But I think this is the case with any startup ministry, and digital space specifically right now is pioneering. It's not digital space isn't pioneering for the rest of the world. They've been living there for years. Digital space is pioneering for the church, who, I don't know, we think we're getting on a Conestoga wagon, and then you show up at the gold rush and there's like a cyberpunk 2077 city already in place, right? And you're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea this was here. And so I think that it starts with that. The tools part is a hard thing to figure out, but if you use the right platform and you can put up the walls and figure out how to use the tools, do a lot of YouTubing, that sort of stuff. And then it really is about you as the leader. Are you actually going to live your life there? And are other people going to live there. I think platform adoption is a really hard thing to overcome in digital space. People only want to be in so many places online. People only live in so many places online. Believe it or not, our hardest piece at Lux is because we're ministering to digital natives already, right? They're already actively living a large portion, if not most of their life in digital space. The actual challenging part for us is convincing them that they should live in our server and not somewhere else. Yeah. And that goes back to this whole idea of where should people find community, right? I have Ben in my church. Is Ben super active in our Discord all the time? No, he's not. But Ben does play Magic the Gathering in another server 3 nights a week. Okay. Well, Ben is around people who aren't believers and has the chance to be the image of Jesus to them. So am I better off trying to force Ben to build community over in my space because it makes me feel better? Or am I better off with Ben finding a great deal of his community inside of another space where he's actually engaging with non-believers? And so, really, I think the question when it comes to community is like, is the goal for people to have a community, or is the goal for people to be in a community in a space that makes you feel good?
That's good. The interesting question is how do you get to that level of trust when you have people in your community that are going forth into other communities that you can't see? How are you building that in? Is that a discipleship pathway? Is that a leadership training? What's your MO there?
I think it's touch points, right? Like, I know that about Ben because I've met with Ben. I know Ben. I know his story. I think one of the other ways to really generate community is through story. It's through hearing people's stories. It takes a lot of time and intentionality, but having spaces where people can share their story humanizes them, moves them beyond screen names and profile pictures. And I've done a lot of that over the last 2 years, has just been like, hey, after service tonight, I'm going to be in this room. And most of what I do in this room when people stop by the Meet the Pastor room is I just ask questions and try to get at their story. Met with a guy last night for the first time at our church. I now know what he does, why he does it, his work, the games that he enjoys. I don't have his full story, but I'm beginning to gain access and permission to hear that. And so hearing people's stories is a really important piece of an introduction to community, because once people feel seen and heard, they feel a lot safer in your space, and they feel like there's people here who genuinely care for them. And then they're a lot more likely to actually, come into that space and engage in that space. And hear other people's stories as well, because they feel like their story's been heard.